Well, I'm very happy to have Tim back. Tim, come over. Tim, everyone. Tim?
Oh, yes. Sweet.
Not for you.
Oh.
No.
I like desserts.
Well, people do too.
All right.
Okay. So, but be respectful with those chocolates.
Okay.
I
just faked it. All right,
Yeah,
where am I
yeah,
going?
sure.
Anywhere?
Well,
Anywhere?
you need to ask people for permission, you know.
All right, yes. Who wants chocolate chucked at them? That's a lot of people, actually.
That's a lot of people,
All right,
but you have
people are
only
game
like 3
for this.
chocolates.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Oh, sorry, that was aggressive.
I mean, Tim.
I'm gonna lie. I got a lot of. Did you all
be
sign
careful.
waiver forms before, right? Like, okay. That was.
Okay.
I'm a little nervous about this now.
Yeah, I can see that.
All right, now I got to put a little more air under it, maybe. I'm gonna aim for the top, and we'll see how this goes. Oh no. Are you okay?
You're not getting any more. You know. Anybody else? Just one more?
I'm done. You good? Okay. I think getting
All right.
the thing in front
Well,
of her, not
talking about like the velocity,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
I mean, I probably will not be able to make a connection to web
Right.
performance at this point, right?
No.
But I think that a lot of us are dealing with web performance issues in products or on websites, right? And I think in many ways it seems like if you look back, we've been doing this now for a while, like optimizing web performance and all. It seems like it's never is good enough, right? We're thinking like, I mean, at this point, should we have good connections and data network, like networks and all, and we're still struggling. And I'm really excited to see what is happening in the world of web performance, what we can do to actually make our websites and applications faster and better. And with this, we have a team who knows all about it, maybe even more.
That's probably overselling it, but yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
that's okay. No chocolate more for me. Yeah. All right, so with this, please give a warm round of applause to Team KADLEC, speaking on One Step Ahead.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. Go ahead. Yeah, I'm really sorry to anybody who might have gotten hit by those things. They fly different. They fly weird. It feels weird coming out of the hand. All right, so I'm not usually a big fan of doing this, but I wanted to do something today, just kind of, I know we're about to hit lunch. I know you've watched a few talks. Maybe the coffee's wearing off. So we're going to do something all together just to get us all kind of energized, ready to go for this talk, the last one before we head off for lunch, okay? So here's what I want everybody to do. On the count of 3, we're all going to blink, all right? Not too strenuous, right? We should all be able to handle that, I think. Unless you had a lot of cocktails last night, in which case I might lose you here. All right, so everybody ready? And I don't need any overachievers, no eye fluttering or anything like that. Let's just a quick blink and be done. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3, blink. All right, everybody back? Didn't lose anyone? Not too bad, right? Now we're feeling pumped and ready to go? That's good. Over pretty quickly for most of you as well, right? The average typical blink lasts somewhere between 100 and 150 milliseconds. Again, maybe a little slower if you're nursing a hangover. Now that's not a big number, but it's one that I've always found very, very fascinating from a performance perspective because that 100 millisecond threshold has a lot of connections to performance. For one, I've always found it kind of interesting how many case studies there are that show that 100 millisecond improvement in performance impacts just about every business metric out there. Walmart famously found that 100 millisecond improvement in performance led to a 1% uptick in revenue. Zalando more recently found that a 100 millisecond improvement in performance led to a 0.7% increase in revenue. Amazon actually found the exact same thing as Walmart. 100 milliseconds equals 100% uplift. When you're operating at the scale of a Walmart or Amazon, that's a lot of money. And then years ago, Mobify found that 100 milliseconds in the checkout process led to a 1.1% increase in conversions. So very small, literally the blink of an eye, but we have a number of case studies that show that this has an impact on how people react to our sites. It's also interesting because it's tied to the perception of performance. Has anyone ever heard of the thresholds like the 100 milliseconds feels instantaneous, 1 second feels like state of flow? Yeah, those all come from a document that was written in 1968, actually, about how people react to digital interfaces and responses from digital interfaces. And so in this paper, it was discovered that the response should be immediate to be perceived as part of that action. You basically need that 100 milliseconds to get that instantaneous feel. Now, I often wondered over the years if this was actually too conservative. I feel like sometimes we can catch delays even more minute than this. And it's actually funny because if you read the white paper, you don't have to go very far. before the author actually points this exact thing out. Even in 1968, he was saying, you know what, this delay in feedback might actually be far too slow for skilled keyboard users. Because what happens is as you get expertise, as you develop the ability to process this stuff, we process it faster. We need less time to do it. Most of us nowadays, I think they say we can process an image in like 13 milliseconds. That's a number that has gone down every time they do the test, because again, we get better at processing stuff as we start to respond to these digital interfaces. We spend more time with them. We're on our phones a lot. We're doing video games. We just become better and better at that processing. Expectations are not constant. As technology improves, so does our expectation of what that technology is capable of and what is acceptable from it. As Vitaly mentioned, sometimes you hear that argument, hopefully none of us in this room have made it, that devices are getting more powerful, connections are getting faster, we don't have to worry about performance, it's not as important anymore. Believe it or not, I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but that was I was hearing that when 3G came out, I heard it when 4G came out, I heard it when 5G came out. It is yet to be true. Partly because that technology isn't distributed evenly. Right? Like all of us have situations where that connectivity suffers, or maybe the phone is going into like a low power mode or something like that. We all find ourselves in situations where it's not ideal. And partly because, the expectations are actually increasing too over time. Like we expect more of those sites. We have two problems that occur whenever capabilities improve like this. The first is called Jevons paradox. Jevons paradox says that the more we have of a resource, the more we consume. Bill and Andy's law is another way you may have heard this. This is the old story about Bill Gates with Microsoft, Andy Groves at Intel. And Intel would ship these new chips, and every time the new chip would come out, it'd be like, oh, wow, it's so powerful, amazing, can't believe what computers can do nowadays. And then the next version of Windows would come out and use all that processing power, and we need a new chip again. So it was like, whatever Andy giveth, Bill taketh away. Another way of looking at this is like, this is how I am. This is why I have to be careful if I'm working out of a coffee shop, because if coffee is readily accessible, I'm just going to drink it nonstop. That's also why I think the barista at the, was it Frisians or whatever, right around the corner here this morning, she was like, oh, you're back again. So, it's, yeah, it applies to us individually as well. If we look at the last 3 years, we see this on the web. This is the median website over the course of the last 3 years. It's gone up about 27% on desktop and about 29% on mobile. Does anybody want to guess which resource is driving this growth? Go ahead, anybody take a guess? JavaScript. Yeah, I thought maybe images because we are getting more like rich visual designs. Now, that's been pretty stagnant actually for the last few years, partly because I think we've put so much work into different image formats and trying to compress those as well as we can. Here's JavaScript over the last 3 years. We're up about 47% on desktop and about 44% on mobile. If you zoom out to, this is from HB Archive, by the way, a great source of data. If you zoom out just for as long as it's been tracking data, that's what happened with JavaScript over the last 14 years or so. We've gone up about 750% on a desktop and a lot on mobile. May all of your investments grow at the same rate that JavaScript grows on the web. I feel like that would be pretty awesome. So we have more resources, but we consume more of them as well. That's problem number one. Now problem number two, that's called the hedonistic treadmill. And so what this is that as resources become more powerful, our expectations of those resources increase, and it diminishes our satisfaction. Basically, we start needing more and more to be happy with it and satisfied with what we're looking at. A great example of this is video games. Right, what I remember in college, I thought it was PlayStation or PlayStation 2, and we were playing Madden and being blown away by the graphics. You look at it now compared to what's coming out now for video games, oh my gosh, it's like looking at an Atari basically, right? Like the visuals are so much worse than they used to be, or better than they used to be. Our expectations have changed now. A really good example of this as well was with my 8-year-old son. He had saved up some money. We're big sports people, big basketball fans, and I raised them right, so we're San Antonio Spurs fans. And he wanted to buy a Wembanyama rookie card. So we pulled up eBay, and we started going through the listings together. And he's scrolling down, and he's trying to find a card that he likes. And whenever he sees something he's interested in, he clicks it, opens up, looks at it. Nothing too remarkable about this browsing session at all. Very plain Jane, nothing special, until we got to the very bottom of the page. So now he's going to click to the next page, and nothing happens. So he clicked again, and then he clicked again, and he clicked again. And I'm not saying like this was a slow delay. Like, I'm a performance nut. If anybody should be hyper-focused on performance and annoyed by any delay, it should be me. I've made an entire career off of this. But he's sitting there going like this. And it's not like a rage click. Like, we've all heard of rage clicks where people get mad and they're like, you know, it wasn't that. It was actually worse. I feel like it was like a disappointment click. Like, he expected something to happen and nothing was happening, so he thought, oh, I must have messed up, and he just kept clicking and trying to like get the right, you know, the link to actually work. And it bothered me because I was like, I actually thought it was pretty fast. The actual transition to page number 2, maybe a couple seconds, maybe, it wasn't too bad. So I was trying to figure out what was it about this interaction? Like, why did he freak out here and not when he was looking at pages, like the listings earlier? And that's because if we go back to when he was actually clicking on a page, what happens when he's looking at a listing? It opens a new tab, right? So even though there's some delay in terms of loading that page, there's an instantaneous feedback. Immediately, he can see that something is happening. And that doesn't exist on the traditional navigation model of the web. When we're clicking through to another page, right, we have to wait until that page is ready, and then it kind of swaps over. And so not having that immediate affordance was enough for him. Now, his interactions with technology have been very different than mine. My first phone was a Nokia candy bar phone. You know, I had dial-up internet. You know, we used to go make your coffee or whatever while the page was loading. We were still using 2G networks where I live when 4G was rolling out everywhere else. We just got reliable 5G probably in the last 12 months. So I'm very used to slow technology, and that's what I've developed, and that's what I've grew up on. He has not had that. He plays a lot of video games. He's on the iPad a lot. Well, okay, hold on. Before you judge my parenting, not a lot of video games, just like a decent amount of video games. So he's had that immediate affordance from all of this stuff. So his expectations from technology are a lot higher than mine. I have patience, and he hasn't had to learn that. Our expectations are not constant. They are learned through experience. And so I worry a little bit because we have these two buckets here, right? On the one hand, we have all of the sessions, all of these situations where we're in less than ideal situations. We don't have the high connectivity. You know, we have these intermittent networks, the cheap low-end devices. We're not quite making the web fast enough for them. We're kind of leaving those situations kind of behind. But on the other hand, we have rising expectations that come from that hedonistic treadmill, and they're expecting more and more and more out of our websites, out of those experiences. And the gap between these two scenarios is growing. And I do worry a little bit that the web is settling in right here. Not quite fast enough for the less than ideal situations, and not quite fast enough for the people who have those rising expectations for what we're getting from those digital experiences. The good news is, I think we have an opportunity to change that. And there's a couple of reasons why I'm very optimistic about that. One of these is Core Web Vitals, which I'm sure everybody in this room probably has heard of. You know, Google came up with these three, pushed these 3 metrics, put some SEO juice behind it. There's some fair criticism of some of the Core Web Vitals. It can be a bit shallow if you stop there, for example. But one thing that has been very, very good at is driving more and more people to performance. There's more interest in web performance than there ever has been. We used to, you know, hide in the little shadows and talk about it, and now it's everywhere. And I think that's going to take off even more as we're starting to see these things adopted by other browsers. Safari, for example, has INP inside of the technology preview now. This used to be a Chrome-only metric. Now we're going to get it in Safari. If you play with it, the INP metric is very, very slow in Safari at the moment. I wouldn't focus on that too much. I think they're just ironing out the details. But yeah, you can fire up technology preview and kind of take a peek at that. And I think we're going to get an entire new wave of innovation as other browsers get on board with these as well. I do think there's some risk with Core Web Vitals of treating it like a checklist. Like, oh, hey, you know, we've got our 3 things taken care of, and we're done, and being a bit shallow with our focus. So I do think that they work better as a starting point than a finish line. So I would challenge everyone to think critically about what they're looking at and not just accept those sorts of defaults as their own situation. But generally, I think it's a good thing, and it's bringing a lot of folks together. And we've seen an explosion of tooling, we've seen an explosion of standards, monitoring, you name it. And that's a powerful advantage that we shouldn't overlook. As much as we like to romanticize innovation as like, the single innovator who comes up with all the brilliant ideas, that's not really how innovation works. Innovation very rarely comes from individuals. Instead, it comes from a collision of ideas. It comes from people coming at it from all different perspectives. In an actively growing and engaged ecosystem of tooling and people tackling these issues is how we take that next big step. And I think we're also seeing a bit of a return to the browser, which is nice. After years of putting frameworks in front of everything, and frameworks saying things like, oh, hey, we don't really care about server-side rendering, like it can all happen in the browser. Every framework out there now, every major framework is doing something to encourage some level of server-side rendering now, not necessarily defaulting every time to just shoving everything on the client in the browser. We're starting to recognize that, hey, maybe 1 megabyte of JavaScript to get something displayed on your screen is not the best way to approach it. And we're getting some powerful functionality added to the browser itself. So I wanted to walk through one very specific, very focused example of how a couple of these new technologies can play together to create a much better experience very quickly with very little effort. So as I mentioned, I'm a sports person. When I'm not doing my actual job, I do have a side app that's all about sports cards. It's for folks who do grading cards and selling cards and stuff like that. One of the features in this is a collection, where you can have a collection of some subset of those cards. This one is the women's basketball collection. And so the idea here is this is fun. Most people who get into cards do it because it's fun. It's they start as a hobby of collecting. Maybe they get into the, selling it at some point. But it all starts with a fun thing. So it should be kind of a fun experience. I wanted it to feel like you were kind of flipping through your cards and playing. So when you're looking at this collection, what happens is you can pull up other cards in the collection. It swaps up, you get the main details. Nothing too fancy here, right? So this is where I wanted to see if I could do better. And so the first part of this was reaching for view transitions. Has anybody played with view transitions? Okay, not enough hands. This is freaking phenomenal. This is amazing. For 12 years, we were trying to come up with what is the way to do this, how do we handle animation like this and transitions on the web, and we finally found a model that works. So the first thing is just to enable it, this little line of CSS, this is it. View transition, navigation auto. Now by itself, this doesn't do much. If we go back to our example, all you're gonna notice is that there's a subtle fade, right? So when the card image gets swapped up to the one above, we're just getting a little bit of a fade in between, little dissolve effect, nothing too much, but we can do better than that. So in order to do that, what we need to do is we need to tell the browser that this image is the same as this image on the next page, despite the fact that they're two different elements. So the way that we do that is with a view transition name. So on the first page, this is an image. Each of these cards has a unique ID from the database, so I can just use that. It has to be a unique transition name, so it knows what to do. So we just give it a view transition name of card ID. On the second page, this is built-in web components. So on the second page, the actual one up top is a card flip web component that does a little bit of flipping the card around so you can see the front and back when you hover. Browser doesn't care. We just need to give it a view transition name that matches. Even though they're different elements, it'll still figure this out. All right, so with those two additions, again, adding that unique ID to it, suddenly our animation looks like this. So now we've got some sliding. Now we're getting closer, right? Notice that there's some gap here, though, right? There's delay. If you're noticing there's a click, and then we're kind of waiting a second, and then we have to, then the next image kind of pops through. Obviously, that drives me nuts. It's not an ideal situation. The reason why this occurs, though, is because we've told the browser that these are the same, but the browser still needs to figure out where is it going to live on the next page. And to be able to figure that out, the browser has to actually load the page, run any dependent JavaScript that's blocking, figure out the CSS, do the layout on the page. It needs to know where that's ending up so that it can do the transition appropriately. So if we open up Chrome DevTools, we can see this in effect. So if you run a performance profile in Chrome DevTools, I know this is, for those who haven't dove into the performance panel, it can look a little intimidating with the massive flame chart, but it's not too bad once you get a handle on it. But if we run a profile, we make sure to grab screenshots. And then as we're scrubbing through here, we can actually see where this animation is occurring. And it's right here where all of these UA, view transition, UA mix things are happening, right? So what happens right before this transition is this. A style sheet comes in. So we're still waiting for all of the network activity on that second page. Again, it has to have the HTML, any JavaScript, all the CSS, all of this to make sure, like, okay, I know where that image is going to live so I can figure out how to do the transition appropriately. So if we know that it's going to take a little bit of time going back to the network and pulling stuff in, how do we get an advantage there? Well, another new standard, speculation rules. Another one of my favorite ones because, again, very simple in terms of what it can do. Like, it's very concise. You can do a lot with just a few lines of code. But it's very elegant, I think, in that it scales up with you. You can get to some very advanced use cases with it. So speculation rules is, it's JSON. It's a little blob of JSON. You can have this as a speculationrules.json file that you attach as a header on a request, or I'm sorry, on a response. You can have this in the page, like in the head of the page. You can actually create this dynamically with JavaScript, so you can inject speculation rules if you want based on what people are doing. But basically, it's going to give instructions to the browser to do something ahead of time. So just walking through, and we'll come back in each of these. But like this line here, this blob is saying to pre-render wherever it is an internal URL, basically. That's the href matches. I don't speak regex very well. You can do some really cool stuff with it, though, if you do. And then we say to use a moderate eagerness. And again, we'll come back to that in a second. The first piece is this what action to take. In this case, we're saying pre-render, but there are two options for us. We can either provide prefetch, which is fetch the HTML document, or pre-render, which is fetch, render, and load the page. Basically, you're pulling it up in an invisible tab and getting it all ready to go so that when they actually click through to that page, it just swaps it over. You can think of these, I think Harry Roberts has described prefetch as a way of sort of paying the time to first byte cost up front, because again, you're fetching the HTML, so that time to first byte cost is paid right away. Pre-render, you're basically paying for just about everything, because it's, again, loading everything, it's parsing, running JavaScript, it's parsing the CSS, it's doing all of that to get it ready to go. With prefetch, there's less risk, less reward, right? We're talking that time to first byte can still be substantial, but it's not, you know, we still have to go through the entire loading process when we click through. You do want to be careful, by the way, to avoid prefetching pages like that modify state. When I first added this to the site, I was kind of arbitrarily using it, and I accidentally prefetched logout and logged everybody out constantly every time they were browsing. So you don't want to do that. So you want to be careful about modifying the state a little bit. You know, and you don't want to go hog wild about, like, you know, prefetching everything under the sun. But the browser actually has some nice limits enforced for you, so you don't have to think too critically about that, as it turns out, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. The browser heuristics are pretty good. Pre-render has a little bit more risk, more reward. Now we're actually, like, not just downloading the HTML, we're downloading JavaScript, images, CSS, everything, right? So, and again, it's just like another tab off to the side. So there's a lot more performance cost in terms of how much we're requesting from the network when we pre-render something. So as a result, we want to be a little bit more careful with that, and the browser itself is more careful as well. You also have to be aware that there could be analytics and ad gotchas. A lot of modern providers are pretty good about watching for if a page is actually visible and active before it'll, you know, do any sort of loading or processing of that. You just want to make sure that your providers are doing that as well. The second thing is where to apply it to, what to apply it to. For this, we have a couple options. We can provide a static list of URLs, or we can use the where clause, which gives us these conditions to check against. The static URLs look just like this. Maybe you would use this in like a marketing flow or a funnel where you have a very predetermined funnel and you want to like list off certain URLs. That's fine. I actually think the really exciting part is the where clause, though, because we can do some fun things there. So here, for example, with the where clause, what we're doing is we're providing an operator and then we're going to use these conditions. So basically, when it is an internal URL and it does not match our logout page, it's not our logout page, then go ahead and prefetch it. And you can build these out. You can provide a ton of conditions. You can get very advanced with the regex to be able to parse out for certain query strings, all sorts of stuff. It's really like limited mostly by your imagination and your regex skills. But it's a very powerful way of sort of automatically applying these pre-prefetch and pre-render situations. The third piece is when do we actually apply it? That's the eagerness setting. This used to be a little bit more straightforward to explain, but now Chrome, which was the first to ship this, has a number of different variables that it plays. Again, this is the browser being smart. This is one of the advantages we get with the return to the browser. When we're relying on stuff for browser technology, we are getting a lot of the benefits of the browser testing things at scale. I guarantee you, no matter how good a framework or abstraction is, it has not been tested with the rigor that it gets tested when we're developing a standard and putting it inside of an actual browser. It is jaw-dropping how much effort goes into making sure that something works everywhere. So this is what it looks like inside of Chrome. We have 4 different eagerness settings: immediate, eager, moderate, and conservative. And they all have slightly different heuristics for when we're going to fire these things. So conservative is, well, it's the most conservative. It is the least risk, but it also the least reward. Conservative says whenever basically there's a pointer or a touchdown event on the link, then we'll do the prefetch pre-render. Moderate gets a little bit more aggressive. If you hover over it for 200 milliseconds on desktop, obviously mobile, we don't have hover. Or you do the pointer down. And then on mobile, there's some viewport heuristics that they're looking at, basically, where the links are in relation to the viewport and things like that. Or again, the pointer down event. Then we're going to do our prefetch pre-render. Eager, we have a slight delay on hover, like a 10 millisecond hover delay on Chrome. At least that's their experiment. If you're not getting that, if you're not in that experiment bucket, they're doing the same thing as immediate, which is just as soon as you can when the browser has some idle time, making sure it's not conflicting with user behavior and stuff like that. Eager on mobile today is the same as immediate. They plan on experimenting with some more viewport heuristic stuff there as well. You can follow along with these inside of, I'm going to pull this away from my stubble. I fear it's scratching a little bit. There we go. Is that? Okay, cool. Hopefully that ends the scratching. I also feel louder now. You can follow along. There's a doc that Chrome has published where they're sort of they're talking about their planned experiments here and the current state of things. But what's nice about eagerness is it gives us a natural progression that we can use. So when you're first starting out, you might want to just start with that conservative, play it safe, and make sure that you're not breaking anything, that things are working as expected. I work at Cloudflare. We have a, we call it speed brain because everything's got to have a fancy name. But basically, it's applying speculation rules. We use conservative because, well, we got to be safe with it. But our plan is to scale this up as we go. It gives us sort of this ladder to go as we progress, which is nice. And you can get very advanced with it. I mentioned Harry, who has been playing with a lot of this stuff. He has a blog post, very good blog post, about his layered approach to speculation rules that combines a lot of these things together. And we'll walk through this a little bit here for the code. But basically, the pattern here is he's got a prefetch, immediate eagerness. So that means, again, right away, as soon as we can, as soon as the browser has idle time, these are links we want to go out and prefetch as soon as we possibly can. And you use a selector match in this case. So in this case, we're looking for a data prefetch attribute. So if we have a link like this inside of our HTML, we can basically, we're telling the browser, go ahead and grab these right away. Using that same data attribute, we can have a data prefetch false. So this can be, or moderate here, we can look for an internal, and it's not data prefetch false. Data prefetch false gives us an opt-out. These we want to have sort of a moderate thing. So again, moderate was not like right away. Moderate is on hover or the 200 millisecond kind of delay. In this scenario, if we want to use this, both of these in this case would get moderately requested. We haven't explicitly opted them into that immediate with using the data prefetch attribute. And if we add, oh, I'm sorry, oh boy, the bottom one was an external, so external would not get prefetched. But we could also opt out explicitly by putting data prefetch false on this link, and that would opt it out as well. Pre-render, same thing. We're kind of overloading the data prefetch attribute to reference pre-render, again, to opt it into an immediate pre-render situation. So we would use that like this. We're just providing that equals pre-render, getting a little bit more explicit with it. And then again, for the moderate, a pre-render situation, in this case, we're just using that. So what we're doing here is we're preparing the data prefetch. We're prefetching and giving it a moderate, like we're giving it that immediate prefetch in this scenario, but we're giving it that moderate pre-render. So we're paying the time to first byte cost right away, but then when we actually want to do the whole rendering process, we're only doing that at a more moderate setting. So the nice thing is we've given ourselves the head start with that immediate prefetch, but we only go through all the work of the pre-render if we're pretty confident that they're going to do something. They're actually clicking on that link. So pre-render and prefetch actually play nicely together. So I liked this quite a bit. I modified this only slightly for my particular situation. For one, I cleared out this chunk that loads the internal links even if that data prefetch isn't there. The reason why is just I had a couple routes where I had forms that submitted to a route, but I also had links that went to that route. So the form would submit on a post, and on a get method, it would just kind of show that page, right? Well, what was happening is it was prefetching using the get method, so I'd have that version of the page, and then the form would get submitted as a post, and then Chrome would actually use the prefetched thing from the get response, and so basically nobody could use any form on my site. That was a fun one because I did not have anything that alerted on that, and it took me a while to figure out what the heck was going on. Chrome has since fixed that, by the way. Post and get are now handled separately, but I still like to use a little bit of abundance of caution, so I want to be very explicit about whether or not I'm going to prefetch and pre-render. The other thing I did to help with that scenario, and you can do as well, is earlier this year, Chrome added prefetch cache and pre-render cache to the clear site data header. So this header can be included on any response, and what this says is basically clear all the prefetch cache and clear all the pre-render cache. You can actually use this for other things like cookies and client hints and things like that as well. But basically, when the server responds with the response and we see this header, it tells the browser, hey, something probably changed, so let's clear out everything. We're not going to use that prefetch cache or anything like that. So this is another way you can give yourself a little bit extra safety. I know Shopify has rolled out speculation rules on their platform, I believe across all of their Liquid template navigations. And they use this pattern very heavily to help make sure that you're not getting, kind of stale content. The only other things that I added to this little blob of JavaScript, JSON, was, again, explicitly saying I don't ever want to do anything with logout. I just want to have an abundance of caution. And like in theory, I don't need this. In theory, as long as I just remember never to use a data prefetch on one of my logout links, I'm fine. But again, after having done that, it's not great logging everybody out automatically. So I want it to be very, very careful. So it's just an abundance of caution, another way to make sure that, hey, even if data prefetch is there, because I've explicitly said it cannot match the logout path, I don't have to worry about that ever happening again. So how do we make sure this is working? In Chrome DevTools, when you look at the network panel, you'll actually see a list of all of those prefetches occurring. Now, you can see they're happening further down here, right? We have our document, our style sheet, our images. All of that stuff is coming in first. It's being deprioritized. The browser's not trying to do a race condition situation where it's prefetching against things that you actually need on that current page navigation, but it's firing these prefetches off. Another place we can see that is in the application panel. There's actually a speculative loads section in this massively long sidebar. It's also fun as pages get more and more complex, this sidebar keeps growing. There's so much more for the application stuff than there was when they first shipped this. But here we can see, for example, that we have 11 not triggered, 4 successful. If we click through to see what's going on, we can see here all the prefetches are ready. That means that the browser was able to successfully go off, prefetch these immediately. You can see the pre-renders because I'm not immediately pre-rendering anything. Those are on moderate, so if you hover over the link, that's when I'll do the pre-render. Those are all there. They're primed. They've been discovered by the browser. They're just not triggered yet. And then as we interact with the page, we can see these things changing. So as I'm hovering over links, you'll see some of these readies, we've got things switching over to ready. We see a failure there. Call out a couple things here specifically. One is that whenever we pre-render something that also had a prefetch, the status for both will go to ready. Remember what I said is we can pair prefetch with pre-render. So we get the request for the HTML right away, and then the pre-render can kick in on top of that. So when we do that, it switches the state for both over to ready for us. The other thing that changed here is you'll notice this one that says a failure. That's actually our third pre-render. So the browser here is enforcing some limits. Because again, remember, this is making an invisible tab. Anybody have a tab problem? When, like, I have a tab problem at work where I start the day with like one browser window and it's clean. And by the end of it, I've probably got 20 browser windows with 30 tabs each. And my computer's really slow, and I'm like, why is Chrome having problems? Like, you know. So basically, they want to avoid us being able to do that to people. So they're putting a limit on it. The limit actually varies depending on the eagerness setting that you use. And it's actually a little counterintuitive at first. So when moderate or conservative is used, again, that requires a hover over or a click. Chrome will only prefetch up to two resources and pre-render up to 2. And as it gets to that third one, it's going to evict the first one out. It's like a first in, last out. Yeah, first in, first out. Yeah. With immediate and eager, which is where we're doing this right away on page load, it actually will do up to 50 prefetches and up to 10 pre-renders in that scenario. The reason is, again, counterintuitive maybe, but it's about the success criteria, right? If Chrome is doing this work, it wants to make sure the browser, like the user is going to benefit from it. So with moderate and conservative, because there's a user interaction that takes place, we're very confident that the user is going to use that next navigation. They're going to move to that page. We're talking hover and click here. So Chrome doesn't need to spread a very wide net. When we're doing it immediately, there's no user affordance. We don't know exactly what the user is doing. So Chrome is like, all right, I'm going to cast a wide net, do a lot more, and hopefully one of these is going to be the thing that happens next. So that's why it's a little bit more aggressive with the immediates. So again, keep this in mind. If you're doing like, the browser's trying to put some limits for you. If you are like immediately pre-rendering a bunch of stuff though, you can have basically up to 10 invisible tabs, 10 data costs, all that stuff, memory usage in play. So you do kind of want to balance this a little bit, and that's why I tend to gravitate away from being very like immediate or eager on a pre-render unless I'm very sure that's the next place they're going. Pre-renders are a little tougher to see in DevTools. If you look at the network panel, you'll see the visuals for them, but you won't show the requests anywhere, like in the actual panel below. To do that, we actually have to go up here and we have to switch the context to one of the pre-render pages. You'll see we have the main, that's our main navigation, and then we have these two that say pre-render. Those are two URLs that have been pre-rendered. If we switch over to that, now we'll see that all the resources for that page have been requested and downloaded for us. So that's how we make sure the pre-renders are working. So now pairing, there's a lot of talk, but going back to our example and pairing this pre-render with our view transition, now you see we've got a click, a little bit of a gap. All right, we're getting faster. There's still a little bit of a delay, and it's this. Remember that style sheet? We spend all this time talking about view transitions, speculation rules, two very cool new things that can get us a long way, but the fundamentals still matter. As my experience has told me that like most of the time, most issues boil down to our fundamentals still, even with the fancy stuff that's been coming out. So in this case, we have a style sheet. Style sheet has to be requested, downloaded, and parsed before we can render a page, right? One of the ways that we can make that faster is by inlining that CSS. Thankfully, for my site, when it goes out to production, that CSS already gets automatically extracted and inlined into the page. That means it's all there within the initial HTML document. There's no need for another request. There's no blocking style sheet. So in production, this is what it looks like. Click, switch, click, switch, click, switch. A little gap on that one every once in a while, but for the most part, it's pretty darn instantaneous, right? Measuring this, I used SpeedCurve and looked at the data, and whenever a prefetch occurred, whenever these pages were successfully prefetched, it resulted in about a 32% improvement in LCP. So not bad, 700 millisecond improvement, considering that in the grand total of things, we only put a few lines of code out there to make it happen. And on top of that, the experience is much more rich. It feels much more immersive and fun, and it's a lot closer to that sort of experience of flipping through cards. Just as a reminder, we started with this, and then we ended up with this. Now, I talked for, I don't know, almost 40 minutes, all right? But all it took was this. We added a view transition name to the image and to the card flip element. We added those 3 lines of CSS to say, hey, turn on view transitions. And then we added this little blob of JSON. to tell it to start getting a little bit of a head start on some pages. So a grand total of 2 lines of HTML, 3 lines of CSS, and 30 JSON lines, which honestly could have been condensed quite a bit anyway. So a grand total of like 35 lines of code to get a 700 millisecond reduction, 30% reduction in LCP, and to have an experience that feels a lot more fun when you're flipping through cards than just sitting there and waiting for that in traditional navigation. And again, I talked about this for like 37, 40 minutes, but it doesn't take very long actually to do this. As an example, right before Calvin's talk, I was off in the backstage, and Vitaly reminded me that I have a history of including Vitaly in my slides. And I could tell that he was really hoping I would do it again. And I actually hadn't planned it. Like I was like, I didn't have time. I was very focused on the talk, but I didn't want to disappoint him. So I thought, well, what could I do really quick? And so while Calvin was presenting, I whipped this up in the browser. And again, this way Vitaly said, and it's great. Again, this is all it took. Like it's a little bit more. Like I had to add a couple. Basically, you can pair view transitions with keyframes. So we have a keyframe that's a spin out, a keyframe that's a pop in, and then we just tell the view transition that instead of using the auto, we're going to use these animations, give it a little timing. So we can, it's a little bit more advanced, but this is it. It wasn't that many lines of code. I think when I actually condensed this and pulled out some of the stuff, it was like 10 to 15 lines somewhere in there, right? Again, years ago, it would have taken me a long time to troll Vitaly like that. It took me like 10 minutes. It was awesome. This is freaking awesome. I don't know about you, but I feel like having technology like this, where we can provide these kind of improvements with that little code, with that little effort, that's incredible. Making these kind of optimizations so easily available, like we're about to unlock, and again, Safari has view transitions, Firefox has view transitions. Safari is getting speculation rules. Yoav Weiss, who's shipped pretty much every important browser thing over the past 10 years, is working on adding that to WebKit, and he's getting that stuff landed there as well. Like these technologies are not going to be isolated to Chrome. They're coming into these other browser engines as well. This is going to unlock an incredible wave of new innovation and opportunity for us. Like, we're going to see some really cool animation work. I'm not a good animator. I'm not that creative with it. Some of you all might be. And some of the stuff you're going to do with view transitions is going to blow everybody's minds. And it's going to be experiences that we haven't had on the web before, with the exception of maybe like Flash splash pages from back in the day. And so maybe we don't want to recreate all of those. But I'm excited for what happens next. And again, it's just a few lines of code. It doesn't take that much. And any time that we make something like this so approachable, the benefit is that ease of innovation. And this only comes when we bet on the browser. Betting on our browser, that's the best chance at long-term success. Performance doesn't get fixed by dropping in another abstraction or another tool on the page. That's not the way it works. Usually, it's the opposite. The more abstractions we use, the slower the page gets. But it still plays a role in innovation. As much as a performance person, I am contractually obligated to pick on React and all those other things because of the performance overhead it does, I cannot deny the role that they play in pushing the web forward. When we talk about things like speculation rules, all of that stuff, like quick links existed. There's all sorts of solutions out there for trying to do that, like how do we programmatically prefetch these pages. When we talk about view transitions, a lot of that, we had a lot of animation stuff that come into the JavaScript frameworks to try and push those things forward and experiment with it. I haven't even talked about like lazy loading images, which is now an attribute. Again, that was another thing we had whole JavaScript libraries for. Like they work as a great experimental playground for pushing the web forward, and then we take that stuff and we figure out, well, how do we do that at scale for the entire web without requiring a megabyte of JavaScript to do it? So they do play an important role in the actual innovation process of the web. And I do believe that the best abstractions are the ones that are willing to fade away when they're no longer necessary. And we're seeing that again. We're seeing some of these frameworks taking things like view transitions, taking things like speculation rules, using those and gutting the core functionality that they used to have to require to make these things happen. That's a good thing for us. Good performance isn't solved by a drop-in. The way that we get better performance, the way that we meet folks in those less than ideal situations, while still meeting people that are like dealing with the hedonistic treadmill and those rising expectations, is we have a ruthless obsession for the user experience. We hyper-focus on it. We make sure that we're measuring the things that matter to us. We're making sure that we're trying to constantly challenge ourselves to be better than that traditional experience of sit, wait, round. And we experiment with how can we close that gap as much as possible. And so, yeah, I had a little bit of worry at the start of this, right, when I was talking about that gap, but I feel like we can close that. We have more and more powerful standards. They're getting us massive performance gains in just a little bit of work, and they're unlocking a whole new wave of creativity on the web. I think we're better equipped than ever to make sure that that gap gets closed. So let's get to work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim. So I'm impressed by your impeccable coding skills, especially in the last example. This was spectacular. It really was.
I didn't want you to be sad.
That's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. I've seen worse.
I'll post that one online too for anybody who wants it.
Sure. It can go viral. Before I know it, can become like a TikTok celebration and stuff. We have a couple of questions just before we go into break. There were some really interesting questions in there. One of them was around prefetching. Victor is wondering, prefetching can improve performance, but can eat up data in constrained environments, for example, on the mobile hotspot. Do browsers now account for data saver settings as well, or should you give users settings around this?
Yeah, so first off, we have to, I can't speak for all browsers because again, today, speculation rules is Chrome only. The WebKit implementation is being worked on and things are landing, but it doesn't exist yet, and we don't have Firefoxes yet either. So when we get to heuristics, like how the browser makes decisions about when to do this and when not to do that, those are typically done on a browser-by-browser basis. Historically, Chrome's heuristics tend to be a lot more in-depth and complicated in many situations than some of the other browsers. But yes, Chrome right now does respect things like energy saver mode, low data mode, save data, I think might be still floating around somewhere. Like it does, they have a list of like 5 or 6 scenarios like that where they're just not going to do the prefetch or pre-render, or at least trim them down based on those user settings. And I would expect that we're going to see the same thing from, similar things from Safari and Firefox as well.
Okay. Bruce B is wondering, how does prefetch and precache compare to or work with service workers? Will the prefetch pull from the application cache?
That's a great question. I actually haven't played with service workers alongside of speculation rules yet. Based on what I know of how the caching mechanisms work, I would expect that yes, it would pull, like if it's sitting inside. Well, I would expect the prefetch actually would first try to go out and see if we've already got this cache, right? Because it does play with the normal cache layers. It is one of the benefits of like even in those situations where we prefetch something and then the prefetch goes away and then we prefetch it again, as long as there were enough, like we had the headers indicating that like it was a cacheable resource, it's not paying the full thing. It's just like another browser request and it's cached and it's ready to go. So I think it would work the same way with service workers, right? Service workers there's a separate cache that is maintained for the service worker. But as long as that's there in cache, it should be able to access it that way. It'd be a fun one to play with. I think you could probably get some really interesting combinations with service worker and speculation.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that we get all these fancy, wonderful little ways to tweak and bend and do all these things. But I think like one of the questions that often comes up and almost always comes up is there any reliable way to deal with third-party scripts?
No, that is unfortunately a tale as old as time. That question is, yeah. From a performance perspective?
Yeah.
Well, so I mean, a couple things to keep in mind with those is like, first off, you don't want, as much as possible, third-party scripts. You don't want to be loading stuff from another domain in a blocking way in any way, shape, or form. You're putting a single point of failure on your site that way. So if like I'm loading in, what is it? Oh, shoot. No, I'm not going to call them. Oh, okay.
Party-tone?
What?
Party-tone?
Oh, party tone is an interesting, I'll talk about that in a second. Right. No, I was going to say like even like Google Fonts, like loading it off in some cases like a blocking style sheet or anything like that from this third-party domain. Back in the day when we did some analysis of this when I was at Akamai at the time, we found that like that was like the most common SPOF, like single point of failure on the web was Google Fonts because people would load it, there's an issue, and now suddenly their server's issue, like if they're coming back slow to respond, guess what? Your site is slow to display. So you want to get third-party stuff out of that main critical path to get the page displayed. Push them off as much as you can. The execution is tough. Party Town was an interesting experiment to try and use workers and stuff to get the execution of these scripts off into a separate thread. Honestly, the data, there wasn't a lot of data out there though, other than like, it looks great in Lighthouse. Like it looks great in synthetic testing tools. But when you put it into real user data, there just wasn't much that I've seen that demonstrates that it had the impact that it was expected to. And in fact, it was pretty tough to see the impact, unfortunately, on the real user data that I have seen. It's an interesting experiment. So I think that might be one of the ways that we handle this going forward, is like the more we can do to try to push those off into separate threads, the better. Other than that, just be very picky about which third parties. And if you're at a company that's like, you haven't committed to a third party yet, and especially a larger company where maybe you have a little bit of pull, that's your best time to push back on performance overhead, is before you've signed the contract, because they want your money, and that's when they're going to work hard to try to achieve that.
I think like of all the issues that a lot of companies have, I think that this third-party scripts are dealing with that is kind of really a challenging part. So it's always a bit tricky to find any kind of sources of how to get there, right?
Yeah, it's challenging because it's one of those things where like the technology part, I always feel like the technology part of things like performance and other stuff, like, don't get me wrong, like there's plenty to learn and plenty to do there, right? But honestly, the technology is almost the easy part at times, right? It's the process and the business politics and everything else that goes into it. That's where the challenges come in, because that's where it's like, it's great for that app that I own, like it's just me, and I can be like, oh cool, like this is the thing I'm doing. But if it's, you're sitting there and you're working in a large organization, it's so much of the performance work or accessibility work or security work, any of those pillars of the web that just don't get the attention that they should, is you being very patient as you do your best to advocate for the importance of this and push towards it and get those incremental improvements. Like, I think it's worth noting that like, most of those changes are not, like, it's rare for us to get a 1 month instantaneous boom performance fix and we're good. Most companies that I've talked to who have a strong culture of performance, that is a journey that took 18 months, 24 months, 36 months to get to. Like, it's a gradual process, so you do have to have a little bit of patience with it.
Yeah, so maybe just 2 more questions. Some of them were kind of connected, related, so I'm going to bring them up together. Chris is wondering, there are some amazing APIs and features, but what advice do you have for incompatible browsers if there is no polyfill? And connected to that, Jay is wondering, if the browsers don't support it fully yet, what does the fallback position look like?
So the nice thing about both of these is that they are built in a way that they work great with progressive enhancement. If I can have that speculation rules blob sitting there, and there is zero negative impact in Firefox or Safari, other than I've added like 5 lines of code, and I guess if I put that in a header, I mentioned you could load the JSON file as a header, then it's zero like impact, because then the browser just doesn't know and it's not going to look at it. So as other browsers ship it, as Safari is probably going to be the next one to ship, Safari will just start benefiting, and nothing bad happens in Firefox. It's no worse. Same with the view transitions. Again, that first experience wasn't ideal, right? Like, not as nice, I guess, as the finishing thing. But if I'm still working on the fundamentals, still trying to make my pages load fast, just means they get a traditional navigation when they're clicking through cards, right? Yep. So again, I love standards that are developed in a way that grow up with you. And I love standards like this where we can add them to the page now, get benefit, and then as other browsers start adapting, we just get the benefit there as well, and we're not actually paying. So I would suggest, personally, unless you're, for some reason, it's business critical to have some of the animations, I wouldn't recommend polyfilling, I don't think, most of the time, the animations. I think the transitions, usually, I think the performance overhead of a polyfill or anything like that, probably too significant. Maybe with the prefetch and stuff, you could probably be creative there. Right. That's where you could use like some service worker stuff, or there's, I think quick links is maybe a 2K file. There's some small solutions you could do to do some prefetch and pre-render of links. Maybe that one's worth polyfilling at times.
And the most important question came from Adam. Is there any hope for the Chicago Bulls in 2026?
I like Buzelis. I think he's going to be legit. So Adam, wherever you are, I think as long as you all keep him around, it'll be good. It'll be fine.
Okay.
I
And
don't know
then
about this next year though, but like eventually.
okay. And then there is another one, and I'm not sure how to respond to that and what is meant here, but can we get a Gru Minions collaboration at the after party tonight?
A Gru what?
A Gru Minions collaboration.
Oh, a Gru Minions collaboration.
I don't know what is meant here.
Well, I mean,
No, like at all.
I mean, you did the motion capture for the
Did I?
film, so
Yeah,
I mean
sure.
that's where they. Yeah.
Getting no credit.
You would
though.
know better than I.
No
would.
royalties either.
Yeah, that's sad.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. Yeah. Okay. Well, that was Tim, everyone. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, buddy.